I think it gets back to your point. It's the trust issue, but once the trust becomes questioned between you and your top performer, you've got an opportunity. And it's kind of like re-recruit your keepers, okay? And so I would rather personally know this is happening than not know it's out there and just rock along and I lose Jane and have to try and save Jane at the end when she's already made up her mind to move on.
And how do I do that?
What do you mean?
How do I find this out?
A lot of times on LinkedIn profiles, you will see how much connective tissue there is when somebody sends you a LinkedIn invitation to become connected to them. Okay, oftentimes you'll have management team individuals that will do that amongst themselves. You can actually do it proactively by starting that, creating it, and having a way to look at it. Okay, now as this gets more and more sophisticated, I'm sure there will be more and more ways to block it and protect it, and yet for me, I'd rather know that that person has decided to look so I can do something about it now, rather than having it come as an end result a month from now where they say they're leaving.
I have a question about that, the level of trust. I don't personally think that any employee is going to tell you that they're leaving no matter how much trust you have, because, you know, it's just not done.
Sure.
I mean, I've never heard of that. Even when I moved from California to here, I trust my employer 100%. We were very open, but I never told him I was leaving until I decided I was gone.
Sure.
You know, and not that I didn't think he wouldn't help me, it's just that's not what happens. You know, when you're fired, you're not given any notice, but when you quit, you're expected to give notice. So, you know, there's a double standard there, and so I just don't think that that's possible, that you're going to have that level of trust.
I think your comment's well taken, because employees, I mean, indentured servitude has ended. Okay, employees are free to work for whomever they want, whenever they want. Okay, and to your point, oftentimes employees make personal decisions about, I'm ready to leave, I want to move on, and this has been a great company, I've worked with good people, but something's changed my mind, either career path, there's a better opportunity, I just got passed over for a promotion, or I don't see a path here. Those are often drivers that cause employees to begin to look. Okay? So your point's well taken, that I don't think a lot of times an employee is going to disclose that openly, like, I'm out of here, I'm going to start looking for a job. Why don't they do that? Well, they fear that you're going to say, okay, I accept your resignation, thank you very much, goodbye. And the employee doesn't want to find themselves unemployed while they've are making this decision. So you're right, I think many times that trust element can be there, and yet people make personal decisions to make changes. Okay, question, yes?
We have a different side of social media. We have an employee talking bad, blogging bad about a supervisor, management source. And so somebody put in a silent listener and told us about it.
Okay.
Do you consider that classified as libelous?
Well, sure. She was talking about finding out that an employee was blogging negatively about the company and decided to put in a silent listener, okay? And what would be some of the liabilities associated with those types of activities. Employers have the right to monitor the use of its company systems. Okay, so what?
They just found out about it. I don't think they were doing it on company time. They might have done it from their home.
Okay, so they're blogging from home, and when you say a silent,
the company time was being used.
okay, when you say a silent listener, though, help me understand a little more.
Whistle.
Oh,
Let's do the Enron.
okay.
Report.
Oh, whistleblowing. Sorry. Sorry.
Call it silent whistle.
Okay, got it. Got it. So an employee brings, some other employee brings this knowledge to the company, and they say, hey, I don't know if you've seen Joe, but he's out there and he's saying really bad stuff about the company on this blog.
Saying really bad stuff about their direct supervisor.
Okay, direct supervisor. Okay. What do y'all think the company has the opportunity to do?
Talk to the employee and find out why. And then talk to the supervisor, get them together to, get a dialogue going as to what the problem might be.
Right. Okay, so how do you then address some of the negative that's out, the cart's out of the barn already, the cow's out of the barn. How do you start to address some of that as well? Any ideas?
You write the resolution on the site that they had the comments.
Yeah. Yeah, you take a proactive approach to go back and participate, okay? And you have to be careful about not being overly defensive or, those kind of things. But you go back and participate to say, we took this seriously, we investigated it, we've brought it to closure, those types of things. Okay? You did? Yeah, that's obviously the right thing to do, and clearly talk to the supervisor, talk to the claimant.
I just wanted people to know that it wasn't company time.
Sure.
It wasn't on company system.
Right.
But it was out there.
Exactly. Okay. Okay, this next one is actually just happened in the state of Colorado, and it is employees that are representing political views while actively employed with the company, and getting back to the use of how much company time they're using to do so.
The social networking bug might have bitten one state employee a little too hard, and now his colleagues are receiving reminders of what is okay and not okay while spending time on the internet. This all involves the Chief Animal Protection Officer for Colorado and the statements that he has made on his Twitter account. 9 News reporter Chris Vanderveen is in the Information Center, and Chris, we don't know if that employee was actually reprimanded.
Mark, we don't. The Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture wouldn't comment on what was and what was not done to Scott Dutcher. We do know that late last week an email was sent out to all employees within the Department of Agriculture telling them not to use a state computer to access any social networking sites without permission for the time being. Scott Dutcher goes by the name Skinny Horse on Twitter. Part of the problem as far as his bosses are concerned is just how prolific he's been on his account, registering more than 4,600 individual tweets. The department says over the last few months, half have come while he's on the job. Some of his tweets have been clearly political, with talk about being a Republican and trying to, quote, take our country back. But far more concerning to some animal rights people is the nature of some of his tweets. He clearly has a strong dislike for the Humane Society of the United States, a very vocal advocate for animal issues in the country. When a Boulder woman was found guilty of taping a dog to her fridge earlier the year, he tweeted, a felony seems a bit much in comparison. In what appears to be a joke, he also tweeted, eat more polar bear. And in another, he said, success over animal rights is the best revenge.
I was appalled that a state employee charged with protecting animals would clock in and spend his day churning out anti-animal protection tweets.
But it wasn't authorized. We didn't know about it, and it was something that we spoke with him about. He understood why he was not to be doing that.
There is an ongoing investigation that's trying to determine just how many tweets Dutcher wrote while on the state's dime. He'd been doing this for about the last year and a half. His boss, despite criticizing the frequency of the tweets, did voice confidence in his chief of animal protection. In the meantime, the Humane Society of the United States openly questioned today if he can continue to do his job, knowing that he will have to work with people he criticized. Mark, this is something, maybe a valuable lesson for us all.
Everything that you put on the internet should be considered public information.
And it goes everywhere.
Yes, it does. All right, Chris Vanderveen in the Information Center. Chris, thank you very much. Dutcher was not made available for comment today. He's worked for the state since 2001 and has extensive training in the Colorado ranching community.
Yes.
I think it's hard to have a policy, of employee handbook that guards against common sense. I mean, these people do not have common sense.
Sure.
I mean, and I'm thinking scenario number one with the tweeting, because tweeting, there's no protection, at least with Facebook. You know, everybody has to have an account. It's somewhat private, but they're violating Nordstrom's use good judgment in all situations. Can you fire somebody for that?
Well, again, typically you're going to have company policies in place that will have severity violations. Okay, and let's...
Broad policies
Exactly.
probably that cover that sort of thing, because that's a lack of common sense.
Exactly. But I would suggest to you that there are ways to draw attention to these things and make it very clear to your employees what good judgment is and what bad judgment is, because if you leave it to their own device, you may have to defend their judgment later. Okay? So, yes, Hilton.
Well, the other dimension to it is there's a distinction between putting something out there that's factual and something that's slander. And the whole concept of slander is one that people need to be made more aware of. And if you come out and say, somebody did thus and so and they disagree with it, that's one thing. To come out and say this person is blankety, 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 that's slander. That's a whole different and a tortious scenario.
So enlighten us, if you would, because you're the all-knowing insurance guru. Enlighten us as to how a company might get attached to that. If I'm the receiver out there and somebody's out there saying all these slanderous things about me, okay, but I'm an employee of XYZ company, what would the exposures potentially be to XYZ company?
Well, if the employee is saying something about a fellow employee, it's conceivable that the recipient of the slander, if you will, could come back against the company in some way, saying that you were negligent in the way that you were policing these kinds of things. So, one of the things you have in your general liability policy is personal injury. Personal injury relates to libel, slander, false arrest, wrongful eviction, and so forth. However, you need to check it, because if it's employee related, that may or may not apply. In which case, there are some other types of coverages, such as your employment practices liability insurance. But you need to have an array of these kinds of things, and you need to look at it in depth, because it's a murky thing. And the more we get into the the tweet and the Twitter and the Facebook and the LinkedIn and all this other stuff, that line is blurred. But you get into the libel, the slander, those kinds of things, defamation of character and so forth, and where you draw the line between an individual on a rant and an individual that was not properly counseled, supervised, company policy did not exist. Therefore, I've been maligned out there as a fellow employee, and you didn't do your job in making sure this stuff didn't happen, and my reputation's damaged.
And so I come back to XYZ company and say, hey, look, you allowed this to take place on your company systems. Exactly. That's the tie back to the business. Okay. Okay. Next one up, company events go viral, and not always in a good way. I'm going to ask a question. How many of you have seen or know of something that's happened, and maybe this is the last 30 days, something called Hope-A-Girl? Marty knows because he sent it to me. Okay, let's take a look at this, and I'm not going to go through all of this because I want to explain to you why in a minute, but think of this happening in your company.